Welcome back to the deep dive. So, if you're out there trying to get a message across, maybe you're a founder, a strategist, working in policy, or really anyone trying to communicate something important, we're just swimming in information.
Yeah.
It's a lot. We're all looking for ways to actually connect. Today, we're going deep on something called communication architecture. And look, we're moving way past the usual stuff, catchy headlines, color tricks. We're talking about the very structure of how meaning is built and received. Our mission here is to unpack this pretty complex system. It claims it can make any message, well, essentially resistant to being ignored, guarantees something they call unmissable exposure. We're digging into the Seven Lowest Power Ads Playbook and this semantic intelligence engine, Sempra-X.
Right. And the key thing to grasp right away, I think, is that the whole philosophy here isn't really about just shouting louder. It's about coherence. The idea is to design your messaging so it integrates with how your audience already thinks and feels, fits into their narrative, instead of just interrupting them all the time.
Okay, integrate, not disrupt. So let's lay down the groundwork. These terms, Seven Lowest, Sempra-X. First up, Seven Lowest. What is that exactly?
Okay, Seven Layers is the framework itself. Stands for Seven Layers of Semantics. Think of it as a really detailed blueprint. It tracks how a message works, from the actual words you see, the syntax, right down to the deep narrative structures it triggers in our minds. It's like looking at the skeleton under the skin of the message.
Got it. Blueprint. And Sempra-X.
Sempra-X is the tool. It's the semantic intelligence engine that actually does the work, mapping, analyzing, refining the content based on those 7 layers. It's the precision instrument, you could say.
And the big claim is, if you build your message using this, layer by layer.
The claim is you basically bypass all the mental filters, the noise that just kills most communication today. You're building clarity right into the DNA of the message. That's what makes it unmissable.
Hold on, though. Is this just putting a fancy new label on communication theories we already kind of know? We talk about messaging matrices, narrative strategy. What makes this architecture fundamentally different?
That's a fair question, really important one. I think the difference comes down to where it started and its intense focus on rhythm, semantic rhythm. We have to rewind way back to 1982.
1982. Okay.
Yeah, this whole thing started, believe it or not, from a kind of cultural observation, decades before the internet flooded us.
Tell us that story.
So the system's creator, he was a young Hungarian visiting the U.S., and he's watching American TV, seeing commercials for the first time. He was impressed by the creativity, sure, but also really disturbed.
Disturbed by commercials? I mean, that's just TV, isn't it?
Exactly. That's what most people think. But he didn't just see ads. He saw them as ruptures, structural breaks. He felt that the story, the show people were invested in its narrative rhythm, was just being violently cut.
So not the ads message, but the active interruption.
Precisely. The ads weren't just pausing the show, they were shattering the flow of meaning. And that observation sparked this lifelong question. How do you make persuasive content that doesn't break that semantic coherence? How do you make it integrate?
That's a really interesting way to frame it. Not the quality of the ad, but the cognitive whiplash it induces.
Yes. And importantly, this didn't start with, algorithms or big data. It began manually. Developed later in Australia, a really painstaking hands-on system for mapping and structuring narrative flow. It was built for clarity, for resonance, and initially only used when the narrative stakes were incredibly high.
And its first real-world application was political, wasn't it?
It was. Because it was so resource-intensive, the manual version was kept for truly critical moments. It was first used strategically in Hungary by the creator's brother, who was actually an early founder of the FIGSC party. Yeah, specifically for things like the major pension reform debates. Situations where the core narrative could fundamentally shift public understanding of the social contract. It was a tool for maintaining coherence under extreme political pressure.
Okay, so that history definitely grounds it. It started as a tool for high-stakes narrative survival, not just selling soap. Now, fast forward. That system informs the book Unmissable Exposure. So this is where that sort of elite political messaging tool becomes accessible for you, the listener, the founder, strategist, creator.
Exactly. And this is where understanding the 7 LOS framework is so vital, because it gives you practical tools to fight the 2 biggest enemies of effective communication today. 1, cognitive overload, just too much stuff. And 2, semantic drift.
Semantic drift sounds like a technical term for just, losing the plot or the message getting watered down over time.
Yeah. It is, essentially, but defined structurally. Semantic drift is how a message's core, meaning slowly but surely shifts as it moves through different channels, hits different audiences, or just gets older. The 7OS framework helps you fight that by defining and locking down those crucial semantic layers.
Okay, let's make that practical. Talk us through maybe a couple of key layers from the system. What's the value of mapping, say, the anchor layer?
Okay, the anchor layer, that's layer one. It's fundamental. It establishes the absolute core, non-negotiable truth of your message, your brand, your policy. Think of it as the concrete foundation of a house.
Okay.
If you try to communicate something that fundamentally violates that anchor, everything else you build on top will crumble. SemperX demands you get crystal clear on this layer first. That's how you design messages that land with real clarity.
And building connection, making it stick long term.
That brings us to the loyalty layer, layer 4. This is all about identity. Real loyalty isn't built just by hammering a slogan. It's built by structuring the message so that engaging with it actually affirms who the audience already believes they are, their values. When they connect with your message, they feel more like themselves. That coherence builds deep loyalty.
Okay, so anchor layer for truth, loyalty layer for resonance. What about when things go wrong? When external chaos hits your message?
Well, you have to anticipate the chaos. That's layer 5, the dispersal vector layer. This layer actively models semantic noise.
Semantic noise.
Yeah, how things like competitor messages, sudden crises, or even just the general clutter of media will try to fragment your message. SemperX is crucial here because it helps predict how and where your message is likely to break apart. You need to proactively design defenses against those vectors that cause drift and overload.
I can immediately see how useful that would be for anyone managing, say, brand reputation or a complex campaign.
Yeah.
But reading a whole dense book series, that might be tough for busy people. You mentioned other ways to access this.
Yes, absolutely. The SemperX team offers more focused options. There are training sessions designed to give you, pretty quickly, a solid working knowledge of the key semantic layers and help you build a tailored exposure strategy, get you up and running fast.
And for a specific high-stakes piece of content, like a critical pitch deck or a policy paper or maybe a company's mission statement, there's the full SemperX session.
That's the deep dive application, yes. They don't just give it a polish. They perform what they call a semantic transformation. They use the full intelligent engine to map its current structure, pinpoint the exact weaknesses, the potential fracture points, and then strategically enhance it to make it incredibly precise and resilient. It's about turning something good into something genuinely unmissable.
This is where it gets really interesting for me, connecting this playbook, which sounds like it could be for advertising, directly to big picture, high stakes, global strategy. You're positioning SemperX as a kind of strategic intelligence platform.
Absolutely, because the underlying principles are universal. Whether you're managing a brand or a nation state, narrative control is fundamental. To really stress test the model's capabilities, they applied the full SemperX analysis to Hungary's pension reform trajectory over the Orbán era.
Right, the case study you mentioned earlier.
Yes, it's a powerful example of analyzing political narratives under intense economic pressure and significant ideological consolidation.
And just to be very clear for everyone listening, we're discussing this specific political example solely to understand how the model works under extreme conditions. This isn't about endorsing any political stance, just examining the tool's analytical power. So what did SemperX reveal about narrative control when policies start to clash with people's everyday lives?
Well, the core finding is pretty sobering, and I think it applies to any leader, any institution, any brand, really. It's this. Even when you have incredibly strong ideological coherence, a really tight narrative, you are still vulnerable to semantic fracture.
Semantic fracture.
Yes, that moment when your policy, especially economic policy, crashes head-on into the lived reality of your people, your customers, your constituents. Rhetoric, no matter how strong, eventually hits a wall when the underlying reality shifts too drastically away from the story being told.
Can you give us a bit more detail on that fracture point in the Hungary example?
Sure. So the Orbán administration was initially quite successful in framing the dismantling of the private pension system as a necessary step for national sovereignty, reclaiming control. That narrative held for a while.
Okay.
But later on, attempts to, let's say, shore up support through things like politically framed bonus payments, framed as solidarity, actually started to expose the underlying fragility. The system showed how this happened.
So SemperX actually modeled that breakdown point.
It did. It models the precise point where the semantic coherence starts to erode, where the gap between the grand narrative sovereignty, national unity, and the individual's experience, maybe like reduced spending power or financial insecurity, becomes too wide to bridge with just words. It pinpoints the limits of rhetorical loyalty when material facts push back hard.
How does the system actually do that? How does it dissect these complex, evolving narratives over time?
It uses three main analytical methods. First is longitudinal narrative mapping, basically tracing how the core framing devices change over years.
Like tracking keywords.
Deeper than that, it models the semantic shifts. So going from, say, an austerity frame in 2009 to a sovereignty-driven nationalization frame in 2010, then to solidarity-themed bonuses in 2018. Each shift is treated like a change in the underlying architecture of the narrative.
Okay, that maps the history. But how does it predict failure points?
That's the second method, identifying volatility thresholds. SemperX is designed to detect the structural weaknesses, the potential breakdown points in that narrative coherence before they show up in things like opinion polls or media sentiment analysis. It's looking for the stress fractures in the core anchor layer, essentially. It acts like a semantic early warning system.
A structural early warning system. Got it. And the third method, you mentioned segmentation earlier.
Exactly, semantic segmentation. This is crucial, especially today. It analyzes how different groups within the population, broken down by maybe age, job, location, ideology, are actually internalizing or rejecting the evolving narrative. It's not just asking what they think, but how the meaning itself is landing and being processed differently by different segments. That kind of insight is gold, whether you're running a country or launching a global product.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly to perhaps the most meta aspect of this whole project. The 9-volume book series itself. You're saying the way the books are published is actually part of the system, a kind of real-time demonstration.
It is. It's a fascinating, almost experimental publishing strategy. The 9 volumes are deliberately structured in 3 distinct phases, each designed to show you, the reader, a different state of semantic architecture in action.
Okay, phase 1, signal cut. That's books 1 and 2. What's the experience supposed to be there?
That's the baseline, the sort of pure signal state. These first 2 books contain no active advertising within them, just placeholders where ads could be. They focus on establishing the foundational concepts, the motif grid, the first 4 layers like anchors and loyalty that we talked about. It shows you what clear, uninterrupted semantic flow looks like before any external noise gets introduced. It's the control condition, if you like.
Okay, pure signal. Then comes phase 2, random drift, books 3, 4, and 5. Sounds like chaos.
It's meant to simulate chaos. This is the entropy edition, as they call it. Ads are placed completely arbitrarily within the text, mimicking the often random and disruptive nature of current digital advertising. The point is to demonstrate how exposure without coherence is damaging. And critically, this phase introduces the 5th layer, dispersal vectors or semantic noise. You, as the reader, are meant to actually feel the original narrative motifs starting to fragment, the meaning beginning to drift because of these disruptive, unrelated insertions. You experience the kind of cognitive disruption the founder noticed back in '82.
Wow. So they deliberately make it messy to show you why it feels messy? And then presumably phase 3 offers the solution. The last 4 books, SemperX aligned.
Exactly. This is the synthesis, the legacy-driven phase. Here, any advertising or inserted content is placed with surgical precision, using the full 7-layer SemperX architecture to ensure it integrates smoothly, reinforces the core narrative rather than disrupting it. And this phase introduces the 6th layer, the rebuilder loop, which is sometimes called motif vaults.
Rebuilder loop or motif vaults, what do those do?
They represent the repair mechanism. They demonstrate how you can use modular components, derived from the core motifs, to reclaim coherence even after disruption. The rebuilder loop shows how fragments of meaning, maybe even from the noise itself, can be purposefully reintegrated to strengthen the overall structure and rebuild trust. It's showing that semantic health isn't just about prevention, it can also be about structured recovery.
It really is quite something to trace this from, like you said, an intuitive observation back in 1982 through this intensive manual phase used in high-stakes politics, now to this democratized framework in the books and the AI tool.
The potential shift is huge, yeah. Whether someone engages with the full SemperX engine or just starts applying the 7 Layers Playbook from the books, the fundamental goal offered to you, the user, is what they call semantic sovereignty.
Semantic sovereignty.
Reclaiming your ability to shape narratives that are not just persuasive, but principled, clear, and built to last. In a world drowning in noise and distrust, that's potentially the ultimate countermeasure.
The ultimate competitive advantage being clarity, and coherence being a legacy. That's powerful. Okay, so let's leave our listeners with this final thought, building on everything we've discussed. If you're messaging your brand's story, your organization's core policy narrative isn't built on a deliberate, precise semantic architecture. Just how vulnerable is that narrative to shattering completely when reality, as it always does, inevitably shifts?
Yeah, Every single thing you communicate is either reinforcing your foundation or introducing hairline cracks. Clarity isn't just nice to have, it's fundamental structural integrity.
A really compelling way to think about communication structure. Thank you for walking us through that, and thank you for joining us for this deep dive.